Hello, and welcome to the Vedic Astrology weather report for August 23rd through the 29th. This week, we're moving toward the second bookend of the eclipse cycle, which is the lunar eclipse, which will come up later this week. And I think a great phrase for this week is shine a light. Last week, we were working the thread after the solar eclipse of August 12th. We were looking at knots and blocks and patterns that may have been keeping us stuck, and we were beginning to figure out which thread to pull. This week is a little different. We're beginning to see what is actually attached to that thread. And that can be illuminating. It can also be a little uncomfortable. So the sun has moved into Leo. Mercury is joining the sun and Ketu in Magha this week. And we are moving toward this lunar eclipse with the moon eventually joining up with Rahu in Aquarius. So we're looking at an interesting polarity between what we have inherited and what we actually want. What did we learn from our family, our culture, our history, our experiences? What did we inherit that is actually useful? And what did we inherit that perhaps has reached the end of its useful life? This is one of the big questions I see ahead for this week. All right, let's talk about the sun, Mercury, and Ketu in Magha. The sun is now in his own sign of Leo, and that's always something I pay attention to because the sun is very comfortable in Leo. And Mercury is coming into Leo this week, joining the sun and Ketu. All three are moving through Magha, nakshatra, which is the first part of Leo. Magha has a very strong connection with lineage, ancestors, authority, and the things that have come before us. And that makes the timing of this particularly interesting because we're still in the middle of this eclipse story. The solar eclipse that we experienced was in Cancer, right at that difficult transition between Cancer and Leo. And I talked about that eclipse as being an opportunity to find the root of an obstruction, to find the underneath the thing, what has been keeping us tied up. Now, the sun has moved into Leo, and we're beginning to see what comes next. So, if the solar eclipse was about finding that knot, and last week's theme was working the thread, this week is shining a light on what that thread is connected to. And that's where Magha becomes interesting, because sometimes we discover that we're struggling with something that's not entirely ours. It's something we're carrying that maybe came through our family. Sometimes we're carrying a story that began a long time before we were born. Sometimes we're carrying a pattern because nobody ever questioned it. And Magha gives us an opportunity to look into that. Not necessarily to reject our lineage or the past, but to think about what do I actually want to carry forward. So Mars, Rahu, I also want to talk about that. Okay, we're talking about inspiration and impulse. So another weather piece is happening this week with Rahu has been aspecting Mars, but they're moving apart and it's loosening. And I think that's might be helpful. We've had that Rahu aspecting to Mars relationship this month with Mars in Gemini and Rahu in Aquarius. And through their nakshatra parivartana, they've been amplifying one another. So that can be really creative. It can be like a lot of ideas. But there's a difference between having an idea and knowing what to do with the idea. And there's also a difference between being inspired and being impulsive. So as Rahu's influence on Mars begins to loosen, we might be getting a little more space between that spark of inspiration and the action that we take after. So that's useful because in addition, we have Jupiter aspecting retrograde Saturn, and that's becoming a tighter aspect. So we're moving from what can I do to what actually works, what is sustainable, what's viable, what can I continue to support? down the road from now? What deserves my time, energy, and investment? And what might have been really exciting, but it's not going anywhere? So these are great questions to continue to ask yourself this week. Okay, also Jupiter and Ashlesha. I didn't mention this last week. There's another, it's like a long-term thread here that I want to bring up. So last week, Jupiter moved into the nakshatra Ashlesha, which is the last section of Cancer, and he'll remain there through October. Ashlesha has that serpent symbolism that we've already been talking about through the eclipse cycle. Mercury is also associated with Ashlesha as its planetary ruler. So we had Mercury and Jupiter conjoining and then moving through that territory together, and Jupiter's still there. So let's think about education, learning, healing, wisdom, connections that feel meaningful or even divinely arranged. There may be a sense that these things are moving more quickly than we expected. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes it means we have to play catch up with our own growth. But Jupiter in Cancer is still a really strong Jupiter, indicating that there's something fundamentally constructive happening here. So, okay, let's talk about the eclipse. The moon is going to be moving into Aquarius, joining up with Rahu. And then those two are going to oppose the Sun, Ketu, and Mercury in Leo. So we're going to have this dramatic axis with Rahu and Moon in Aquarius, opposite Sun, Ketu, and Mercury in Leo. The Moon and Rahu in Dhanishta can awaken something very primal. Dhanishta has rhythm to it. It's connected with the beat, the pulse, the thing that moves us. And Rahu amplifies whatever it touches. So there's a really strong sense of, what do I really want? Not what should I want, not what would make somebody else happy, not what would fit the old story. What do I actually want? And then we look across the zodiac at the Leo and Sun, Ketu, and Mercury in Magha. And there's the inherited material, the family story, the old authority structure, things we were taught, things we identified with. And then suddenly there's this tension. Uh, what I've inherited versus what I actually want. So that's a pretty potent eclipse story that's culminating this week. Okay, so let's now walk through the week. I don't know if you can hear the thunder around me. It's so exciting. I don't know if the microphone is filtering that out. Anyway, okay, so Sunday, you're seeing the chart up here. The moon is in Sagittarius and Purvashada on the 11th Tithi. It's a really interesting combination for pushing through resistance. Purvashada has that quality of persistence, purification, flow. And then the moon will be opposite Mars. There could be some confrontation around your beliefs or philosophy, or understanding. But there's also this Moon Venus nakshatra parivartana on Sunday, which could help us find the path of least resistance. So it's not necessarily about forcing anything on Sunday. It's about finding your way. And as the sun passes Ketu, this is also a beautiful day to remember your ancestors and your lineage and your family members who have passed. So you're not judging your own choices, you're just recognizing them, and Sunday could be breakthrough. Keywords for Sunday. Okay, let's move us forward into Monday. Hold on, I'm trying to get the thing to move. Hold on. Come on, you. Okay, here we go. Monday. So the Monday, the moon starts in Uttarashada, still in Sagittarius, but during the day it will move into Capricorn. Uttarashada spans those signs, and it's about lasting victory, not the quick little win, but the victory that comes from persisting and continuing what needs to be done. So the moon will still be under the influence of Mars. So maybe a little friction, but the message is simple, like keep climbing. Don't abandon something just because it became difficult. Don't confuse difficult with impossible. Intentional progress. Monday. Intentional progress. All right. Let's get us to Tuesday. And here we go. I need an assistant to move my chart. Now we're at Wednesday. Hold on. All right, Tuesday. It's Tuesday's the 25th. All right, Tuesday is strive on. Keywords. So the moon is continuing through Uttarashada and into Shravan, which is all in Capricorn. And the moon will get the opposition of that beautiful exalted Jupiter. I like that because Jupiter gives us hope, and the moon gives us emotional experience of the moment. And sometimes those don't look the same. You can be having a hard day and still be moving towards something nice and good. You can be uncertain and still be on the right path, and you can be tired and still make progress. So Mercury is also passing Ketu around this time, which can give us a little break in some of the mental entanglement. So this is a day for continuing on. Strive on. Strive on. Okay. Now Wednesday. Patiently waiting. There we go. All right. Wednesday is lighten the load. Lighten the load. It's the day before the eclipse, and the moon is moving through Shravana on the 14th Tithi. The 14th Tithi is one about clearing and emptying, and lighten load seems really appropriate for the keywords, because we're not talking about what else can I do, what more can I accomplish. It's more about what am I carrying around that I don't need to carry around anymore. So Jupiter will be opposite the moon. Jupiter's aspect to retrograde Saturn is tightening up. So we're getting a really interesting combination of expansion and contraction. Where's the fertile ground? Where is there something worth investing in? And we're simply carrying a burden that we've carried it for so long. So it's a good day to edit things, to simplify, remove, make room, lighten the load. Lighten the load. Okay, Thursday is the 27th. This is the big day for the eclipse. And did we get there? We did. Okay. So Thursday's keywords are soft stop. Soft stop. And we're getting into that eclipse zone. The moon moves into Aquarius, and Dhanishta becomes full, joining Rahu. And this is the eclipse moment. So soft stop, because I don't think we're saying, okay, the eclipse, everything stops. Just pause. It can interrupt your momentum. It can scramble your rhythm. But Dhanishta is about rhythm. So there's something almost poetic about the rhythm being interrupted so that we can find a different rhythm. Maybe resyncing, feels like. So not necessarily the moment to demand your answer or find your answer, but it could be the moment to notice what becomes visible when your momentum is interrupted. So what suddenly is important? What suddenly doesn't matter anymore? What desire is getting louder? And what story is losing power? Because we're dealing with a lunar eclipse, and we're dealing with the moon, and it's our emotional experience, our sense of safety, and our feelings, and our instinctive reactions. So I would give yourself some space here, soft stop, let that information arrive. All right, Friday is the 28th of August, and we've got creative triage on Friday. Creative triage. It's the day after the eclipse. The moon will be waning, and we're in Krishna Pratipad, the beginning of our new waning phase. But we're also still just digesting what has happened. So creative triage is, I think, a good word for the day. It's not necessarily like, okay, eclipse over, let's get going. No, it's like, what did we just learn? What gets saved? What do we repair? What's no longer viable? What deserves more of our resource? What do we need to put aside? And I think that loosening of the Rahu to Mars influence and the tightening of the Jupiter to Saturn influence really matters right now. We're becoming less reactive and more discerning. We're moving from generating possibilities toward evaluating possibilities. That's an important shift. Okay, Saturday, last day of the week, and that's the 29th of August. So Saturday is for regain direction. Regain direction. And then Saturday, the moon moves from Aquarius toward Pisces and into Purvabhadra. And so we're 2 days out of the eclipse. And this is where I would resist the temptation to think, okay, we got it all figured out. Let's go. Sometimes after an eclipse, the most useful thing you can do is create some space. Space is in the schedule. Space is in the conversation, in your relationship, around a decision. Just give yourself space to think. Purvabhadra can take us into deep reflection. So the key word for Saturday, regain direction. Not necessarily let's charge forward. Let's figure out where we are, reorient and regain our direction. So after the recent revelations, we're returning to finding balance in our relationships and all of that. So don't underestimate that gift of space in whatever form. So that's our week. We begin with our breakthrough. We make intentional progress. We strive on Tuesday. Wednesday, lighten the load. And then we're soft stopping with the lunar eclipse. We've got creative triage and regaining direction. So if I were going to give you one piece of advice for this week, it would be this. Don't rush to fill the space that the eclipse creates. Let yourself see what is actually there. Because the purpose of shining a light isn't necessarily to make us act. The purpose is to see, just to allow yourself to see. And once you can see clearly, you can make better choices about what is next for you. That is the Vedic Astrology Weather Report for August 23rd through the 29th. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next week.